Okay, we are live. Got to let it breathe just for a moment to bring on Facebook. And then we're going to get things cooking tonight. Apologies for being a little bit tardy. It's my fault tonight, gang. Still recovering from a brutal experience at the dentist. I'll just put it that way today. Welcome in, though, everyone. This is the Mile High Huddle podcast. As you know, I'm your host, Chad Jensen. With me, my fellow football priest, who you know, who you love, Zack Kelberman. Zack, the Denver Broncos entering week 14, still shuffling the bottom of the roster in the practice squad. A roster move today, adding to the defense on the practice squad. Who'd the Broncos bring in?
Yeah, so basically they had a vacancy because the Saints poached rookie defensive tackle PJ Mustipher from the practice squad. To fill that void, they signed undrafted rookie linebacker Darrell Nichami. I'm pretty sure I'm butchering that, but that's my best guess. He's capable of playing edge and off ball. He had 32 solo tackles, 17 and a half tackles for loss, 9 sacks, and 4 forced fumbles at Maryland, where he played 32 career games. Obviously, on the practice squad this late in the season, Chad, he's just like a developmental type or a very short-term defenseman to help out on that side of the ball. But that's the skinny on the latest practice squad moves.
Kind of interesting how it's Sean Payton's old homie, Mickey Loomis, in New Orleans, poaching one of his rookie defensive tackles off the practice squad.
I liked him too, Mustipher.
Yeah, he seemed to have some upside. I mean, from what we knew about him in college, and they held on to him through, out of camp as a practice squatter. And so we wish him happy trails, but I guess you could always use depth at linebacker, Zach, especially those guys who can go inside out, kind of like Drew Sanders.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting how they're kind of experimenting with him. I hope it's not going to end with DeMarcus Walker syndrome where they put too much on his plate and don't let him focus on one. But obviously, Vance likes to be multiple on defense, so it's no surprise that they got a guy who's position flexible.
True, too, what Mr. Producer's saying in our green room, that it's kind of ironic the Broncos allowed him to be poached because the defensive line play this season has not been good. I mean, and it's a little bit disappointing, Zach, when you think about it, because Zach Allen, a well-paid veteran, I would argue going into this first year in Denver that Allen was like a Pro Bowl fringe caliber kind of guy with some upside of being a bona fide potential Pro Bowler guy, and he's flashed that at times. DJ Jones, the big signing from last year, it seemed like they had at least 2 of those 3 spots sewn up, but even though we expressed our misgivings about the depth at defensive line going into the season, Jonathan Harris, dude, has been woeful, and Mike Purcell inconsistent, and Matt Henningsen's a hustle machine, dude. He hustles, but again, consistency a big issue.
Yeah, I wrote on Twitter, that was one of my observations after the game, watching the Texans film again. I'm glad you brought that up. The Broncos have been dying for a better bookend opposite Zach Allen, who's starting to play really, really well. And if you compare the stats and the data, playing better than Draymond Jones, the man he replaced. But you know what irks me even more, speaking of the defensive line, is the fact that Elijah Garcia, who stood out in the preseason almost exclusively every single game, has been a healthy scratch and inactive most weeks. I'd like to see what he can do because, as you said, and Scott pointed out correctly, the defensive line has been run through like a hot knife through butter. And I think any big body would help out that situation.
You got the Patriots out to an early lead on this Thursday night. Interesting stuff.
Got a Thursday night touchdown. It's a rare.
Everybody, I think, Zach, in Broncos country are Steelers fans tonight. Steelers, one of the teams kind of hovering in that competitive, 5-6 teams in the AFC that are either in if the playoffs started this weekend or on the bubble. Broncos need the Steelers to go like this, go down. David, the Papa Bear, we're going to grab the super chat here. A couple of quick matters of business. And then also tonight, guys, of course, we've got the head-to-head comparing Broncos Chargers. We're going to talk about Russell Wilson and why he's kind of been relentlessly in the news cycle all week long. And we've got to do the jersey raffle for the superstars for the month of November. But first, the Papa Bear, what's going on, brother? So good to see you, David. Hope you're doing well. He's saying here, Zach, his message, he's holding on to 11-6. That means win out. That means finish this season undefeated, week 14 on. Buck 'em, MHH for life, Dumb Bronx for life. And he's saying here, Zach, this is a nice little segue. Wilson, pardon me, is not our future. Now, I think on one hand, you could say, Zach, that that's a no-brainer. Hello, he's 35.
Yeah.
But that's not really what David's saying. David's saying, the implication anyway here is that he's not the guy for maybe even for the next couple of years. You know, he's under contract for a while, but maybe the Broncos need to start looking. That's been one of the many things that have been talked about a lot this week.
Yeah, far be it for me to disagree with David here, because I wanted the Broncos to draft a quarterback even in Russ's first season last year, just someone to have in the developmental pipeline, especially this year under Sean Payton. And regardless of whether Russ is here or not in 2024, and it's no sure thing, Chad, that he is. We've been hearing rumblings and more smoke to the fire that the Broncos just eat that dead money and move on. But regardless, they have to start preparing for life after Russ. David, I agree. He's not the future, but for right now, he is the present. And I'm going to let the season play out and see how he responds Sunday against the Chargers.
Sorry, Scott. We've got Zeus, the first face etched on the MHH Superstar Mount Rushmore, right here, right now, throwing down some support. Appreciate you, Stu. Hope you're doing well. Thank you. Curious to know, Stu, what your thoughts are on Russell Wilson, because among the many kind of angles that he's been kind of analyzed this week, I'll just put it that way, is the fact that he's, you know, we complain about the offensive line, and especially, Zach, how bad it was. Holy smokes. Especially how bad it was in Houston. But if you listen to a guy who knows a little bit about playing O-line, Mark Schlereth, who absolutely nuked Russ from orbit on his show, Schlereth and Evans, this week, 104.3 The Fan, the morning show, Russ is doing them no favors.
First of all, thank you, Zeus. Always good to see you. You're definitely an icon, and we like to shout you out and tell you that each and every podcast. But, you know, I've seen that narrative, and based on the data and all the stats and what people are telling the masses, you can't gaslight me about that Texans game, Chad, because, yes, both things can be true here. Russell Wilson held on to the ball too long at times. He missed too many reads. He underthrew too many passes. That is 100% the reality. But if you watch the snap breakdown, or even by drive, the offensive line allowed pressure at a rate that I really have not seen since last year. And it's okay. I mean, every unit is entitled to a poor performance. The O-line has been a revelation. I give a lot of credit to Zach Schlereth. You have a arguable all-pro in Quinn Miners, an arguable Pro Bowler in Garrett Bowles, but they were simply not good enough against Houston, just like Russell Wilson was not good enough against Houston. It doesn't have to be one or the other, and people like Schlereth, Chad, seem to have an agenda they like to push. When you boil it down at a human level, everyone has a bias, everyone has an agenda, and everyone falls into one or two camps. To me, it seems like Schlereth is in the not so kind to Russell Wilson camp.
We're going to continue talking about this. I know the morning show guys on Broncos for Breakfast touched on this a little bit this morning. We're going to break it down more. But first, we got to say hello to the Duchess, who's jumping in from the 200th tippity top rope.
204.
Christmas come early for Chad and Zach. And by the way, Scott, power just went out. So he'll be back with us soon. Let's hope it's sooner than later, because he's the guy that does the raffles. So stay tuned for that. But Michaela, love you so much. I mean, seriously, I don't know what we do without you. I've said that before, but also I hope you understand how much you mean to us and your friendship and the connection we have, and what you mean also to everybody in the chat and the conversations that you help trigger and just keep it rolling like that. So she's saying, just showing you guys love. MHH is the best. She is the Duchess. She's on the Mount Rushmore right there at the very top for a reason. Love you, Michaela.
Yeah, we say it every podcast, but addressing this comment specifically, Michaela, the people that you say are the best are telling you, and I can speak for Chad, speak for Scott, that we wouldn't be anything without your generosity, your support, and the love that you show, as you're saying here, each and every podcast. Thank you so much. And if you have anything you want to add, as usual, please get it into the side chat and we will address you pronto.
Thank you so much, Michaela. Love you. My stomach just rumbled, Zach, which tells me it's a reminder.
Pizza.
That, better get some pizza rolling. Make Little Caesars, gang. the official pizza sponsor, by the way, of the NFL, part of your game day. And it might not be a Broncos game day, but it is an NFL game day right now. And whether it's Thursday night football, Sunday, Monday night, pizza and Little Caesars is always a big part of the rotation at Casa Jensen. You order online during our Pizza pregame, 1 hour before, 3 hours after NFL kickoffs, plus all day Sunday, and get ready for some football and fun, baby. You choose your favorite Little Caesars pizza, or you pick the toppings you crave, and either way, you win.
Yeah, you talked about rotation, and they have the ultimate rotation at Little Caesars. Any type of crust that you want, thin crust, pan crust, deep dish crust, stuffed crust, toppings, pepperoni, cheese, Hawaiian, if you like that. I don't know, but it's definitely a winning experience. And speaking of winning, everyone scores with convenient delivery or our in-store pizza portal pickup. So grab some friends and enjoy a few slices during the next Broncos game.
Okay, Zach, I want to grab this. All right. Now, this is Stink himself. This is Mark Schlereth, a few of his remarks. And it's easy to kind of just like immediately go, Zach, into kind of pushback, defensive mode, being protective of Russ here. But let's hear him out, because in this article that Nick wrote on Schlereth's opinion, his hot take here, and it is a hot one, Nick does dive into the numbers, and we're going to get into just a few of them. But here's what Schlereth said, quote, "I could get a quarterback from Smoky Hill High School to do what Russ does. It was bad. It was just awful. First off, let's talk about how many times you run yourself into trouble. How many times do you escape from the back of the pocket? How many times do you allow yourself to be forced out of a play? You scramble, you make a few yards, and everyone lauds you on your ability to get out of there. You are the one that put yourself into trouble." Then he goes on to say, Zach, quote, "It's Tim Tebow-esque when you talk about 55 minutes of dreck, and we're going to praise you for the 5 minutes of good play at the end of the game. You're the one that started the inferno. If you start the fire and you finally douse out the ashes with water, you're not the hero for putting the fire out. When it's burned through all the fuel and it can no longer burn anything, and it's just ash, you don't get credit for putting it out when you are throwing a bucket of water on ashes." Last thing, all right, relative to how this affects the offensive lineman. Quote from Schlereth, "The amount of times you create the pressure, you create the sack. I'm not saying that Mike McGlinchey, right tackle, didn't get shoved into the backfield a couple of times. I'm not saying that they picked up every twist game, because they didn't. They got some pressure up front, but the amount of times you put yourself or your team in harm's way is quite frankly sickening. And as a former offensive lineman, it pisses me off because it's just not right. Those guys take the brunt of the criticism, but it's the quarterback." Now, we can get into some of the numbers from Nick, but with the full context of what Schlereth said, Zach, your analysis.
I don't really know where to start with that. I mean, Smoky Hill High School, Tim Tebow-esque, ashes. You don't think that's a little over the top? You don't think that's a little dramatic? You don't think that's a little hyperbolic? And it's bias. That's all I can really say. I mean, Chad, it doesn't really matter the person that said these things about Russell Wilson. It's been the same response for me. That is an obvious agenda that Schlereth is pushing, and he admits that because he's sticking up for the offensive lineman. But what makes me laugh or shake my head the hardest is he said the offensive linemen take the brunt of the criticism. Have you been paying attention to the Broncos for the last 2 years? Everything that goes wrong. I mean, Joe Smith down the block and stub his toe, that's Russell Wilson's fault. It's not Garrett Bowles' fault. It's not Lloyd Cushenberry's fault. That's Russell Wilson's fault. He's entitled to his opinion, and he was a Broncos great. I respect what he did. It doesn't mean I have to respect his take on Russell Wilson. Again, if you watch the game, Russ was not great. He missed too many things that a $245 million quarterback should have picked up. But when he's running for his life on certain dropbacks, as soon as the ball is snapped, that's the offensive line. And that happened whether he wants to cover his eyes or not.
Yeah, it's, he uses, and I get it, Zach, we've done radio. We've been radio hosts, and you got to kind of bring the hot take. You got to bring the thunder. And when you do that, you spend a lot of time living in the land of absolutes. And when it comes to the NFL, well, I mean, really, when it comes to period. I mean, death and taxes. Otherwise, there are no absolutes. There's nuance. And while it's true, Zach, we have lamented and complained about Russ holding on to the ball too long, never stepping up, which it's understandable to an extent why he doesn't like stepping up because of his height. But Drew Brees wasn't all that much taller than Russell Wilson, and he always found ways to step up and just navigate the pocket and hang in there just long enough, keeping his eyes downfield to make the play. Now, there's an argument to be made here, Zach, that backs up some of what Schlereth's opinion states, but I don't really want to flog that dead horse. I want to come back to Sam Bam here. Brother, thank you for your patience. Thank you for the super chat. Says, hi, guys. I think this is the most pivotal game of the year. The Broncos win. I think 10-7 minimum for making the playoffs is attainable. If not, they will need some help. Broncos are the better team. Go Broncos. Amen. Yeah, man. I don't know. They need help now. So we go back to that cliche, which, cliches are cliches because they're true. The Broncos don't have, they wore out all their room for error. And that Texans game might have been them not only maxing out, Zach, their room for error, but like going into the negative. And that's why they're going to need some luck. They're going to need a little help from other teams. They're going to need, squads like the Steelers to lose tonight, maybe lose 2 more games at least. And meanwhile, Zach, they got to take care of business. I do think apples to apples, the Broncos are a better team than the Chargers, and they're certainly a better coach team. But the Chargers, Zach, would love nothing more than to ruin things for the Broncos. And the Broncos struggled to play in that stadium. Am I tripping? I don't think they've ever won there.
No, not in SoFi.
So, your thoughts for Sam?
Well, can I get something off my chest real quick? Last thing I'll say about the Schlereth, and only because David Youngkin kind of beat me to the punch here. He said, I feel like Russ is gun shy. And you were talking about Drew Brees, Chad, and you're right. The height differential is negligible. But the thing is, Drew Brees wasn't the most sacked quarterback of, what is it, Russ, of the last decade, the last 5 years? Of recent times, Russell Wilson is the most sacked quarterback. And a lot of that damage was inflicted last season when the offensive line was just putrid consistently, not even good for one single game. Doesn't excuse the times that Russell Wilson takes a sack unnecessarily or doesn't complete a pass that he shouldn't make because he's not stepping up. Russ was not good against Houston, not good enough. But if you're completely excusing the offensive line just because you're an offensive lineman, I'm not going to take you seriously because that's a agenda and a bias that you're pushing. About the margin for error that you were talking about, I do think we all want the Broncos to win out. That would be the easiest pass to the postseason. I believe they have one more game they could spare, and that would be Detroit, if only because it's an NFC game. It won't count against the Broncos in the AFC conference tiebreakers, obviously. But this one is a must-win. If they lose this game, I think we can start looking forward to 2024, unfortunately.
Lawrence, what's up, guys? Pizza night. That's right, baby. That's right. Love it. Thank you, buddy, for the support on more than one level. We have the Ronk in our presence even now. What is going on, Mike? Hope you're doing well. So good to see you in the chat, my friend. Thank you for your bright, optimistic spirit and juju that you bring to our community, my friend. So good to see you tonight. Scott, you tell me when you're ready to do the raffle. Scott's back in the saddle. Troy, the pahan donkey, on Twitter. I'm talking his handle here. Thank you, brother. He says, hey guys, sorry I'm late. Hope I'm not duplicative. Russell Wilson is our best quarterback since Peyton Manning easily. So I don't get that vitriol. Expensive, but that's not Russ's fault. We need to upgrade eventually, but relax. Yeah, this is it's a classic case, Zach. Honestly, I have nothing but bow down respect for Mark Schlereth, really. That dude, just as a player, love him and all of his impact that he made in Denver and in the biz, so to speak, sports media. Always I've been a fan of his work. But this to me still, Zach, feels a little bit like an extended phenomenon, or let's put it this way, an extended reaction of the phenomenon we were experiencing Sunday night in the gut reaction, which is everybody MFing Russ, everybody MFing the Broncos, period. And And that's what the gut reactions are for. And that's that's an understandable postures to take in the immediate aftermath of a hugely disappointing and heartbreaking loss where you had no business winning the game, and yet you came one play away from actually pulling it out. But I think it's time to dial it back and remember that the Broncos, he's never going to be the Peyton Manning guy that drops back, throws it 40 times a game, gives you 350 and 3 touchdowns and wins MVPs. He's a guy where you kind of have to create a system and create a model that will hide and shield some of his deficiencies and as he continues to get older. And you've got to really be able to cultivate, Zach, other aspects of your offense to build him up and get the most out of what he can do. But he's still a very good quarterback. Is he a top 5 quarterback nowadays? No. Is he top 10? No. But when the chips are down and you need a play, when the chips are down and you need the game is on the line, there are very few quarterbacks in the league playing right now, Zach, that I would rather have than Russell Wilson. So, there's room for improvement. The Broncos really have no business even being in the conversation for the playoffs with how they started, and yet they are. So let's just, at this stage, guys, enjoy the ride, take it for what it's worth, and try not to feed too much, as Troy's doing here, quite rightly. Try not to feed too much into the myopic hate and castigation. Let's not dredge up, Zach, all of the national lampooning of Russell Wilson from a year ago.
That was my point I was going to make. You said an extension from the gut reaction Sunday. It's been an extension, Chad, since Russell Wilson got to Denver, and it's only intensified every week since then. Troy, you're right. It wasn't his fault that he got offered $245 million, but he accepted that deal knowing what comes along with that, knowing the responsibilities of being a quarterback that's so highly paid with the franchise on his shoulders. And just like Chad, I'm a big Russ guy. I've defended him through thick and thin when few weren't. And I'm even saying he wasn't good enough against Houston. He should have made more throws. He should have been better in the pocket. His 3 picks, you could argue, were the reason the Broncos lost that game. They came in the worst situations. And an example of Russ not being good enough to warrant that money that he's making, the interception, great play by Derek Stingley. Great play, individual effort. But if Russell Wilson didn't underthrow that to Courtland Sutton down the seam, that's a walk-in touchdown. If he didn't underthrow Marvin Mims on the pass that should have been called PI, that's a walk-in touchdown. Now, Russ, best deep ball NFL history, he'll make that throw more often than he won't, but he didn't make it against the Texans. And for that, it falls on him.
We have Phil down in Tucson, my friend. So good to see you on Facebook tonight. He says, good evening. I'm tired of hearing all the negative on Russ. We got a QB that's in the top 15 QB ratings. You want to get rid of him for what? It would take years to build around a new quarterback. Even a top 10 drafted quarterback doesn't mean success. It always is a gamble. Take a quarterback somewhere every year and develop them, in my opinion. Hashtag Buckham. Hashtag Go Broncos. MHH for life. Really appreciate the sentiment, Phil. It really depends. If you hit on the quarterback, kind of like the Texans, all the stars aligned. They got the quarterback thing right, but Zach, I don't think he would necessarily have hit the ground running as quickly and accelerating into his NFL career as CJ Stroud did if the Texans didn't first hire DeMeco Ryans, who also recruited Slowick from San Francisco. And, there are many different factors that play into it, but the Texans are one of those examples where you can hit on a quarterback and go from, when we looked at the schedule, Zach, in the offseason, Texans, we circled as a gimme. Quarter of the way through the season, we realized that wasn't going to be a gimme, and it sure panned out that way. The Broncos lost it, but I agree with Phil on basically all of his points. Calm down on Russ. Are there arguments to be made? Yes. He's not a perfect quarterback. And the recency bias, Zach, coming off one of the most conspicuous losses of the season, one of the most painful because of what was at stake and because they were in it at the end and could have won the game, it's kind of making this linger and dredge up a lot of this the old talking points, the anti-Russ stuff.
It's just exhausting. I know that's the big talking point of the week, but it's the same argument and it's the same black versus white issue. I mean that figuratively when it comes to Russ, and just change out the person saying it. It's Schlereth now. It was someone else last week. It'll be someone else next week. And I agree also. I mean, if I didn't jump ship on Russ after 1-5 after that Jets game, I'm certainly not going to do it now. And that's why I said he is the present, might not be the future, and we have to see how the rest of the season plays out with him under center.
Okay, Claude, what's going on, my brother? So good to see you. He says, no matter how this goes, it's going to be better than we all thought. Weeks 1 through 6, go Broncos. Exactly. You know, you're kind of playing with house money at this stage. You had no business being in it after a 1-5 start. You battled back with 5 straight wins, dropped one in Houston. And so, again, it's bringing up all the bad stuff. But I'm just here for the ride, Zach. You know, this was a season, honestly, that sitting at, especially after that Jets loss, where I was like, all right, it's another lost season and an opportunity, I guess, for Sean Payton to, you know, continue instilling and building his culture and start trying to help pull the Broncos up from the bootstraps. But he did that literally right away and went on a romping run, helped quite a bit, if we're being frank, by the MHH meet and greet. I mean, would we even be talking about the playoffs if not for the MHH meet and greet? But still, I'm just excited to see how this thing pans out. And even if they don't make the playoffs, Zach, this has been a very encouraging season relative to, hey, did they finally get the head coaching thing right? I think at this stage, it's pretty safe to say. And like we talked about, Zach, whatever it was, Monday night in the Aftermath episode, you know, Mike Florio and talking heads around the NFL, you know, they're saying, hey, Sean Payton, through the fullness of time, turns out he was right. Might not have been perfectly ethical to throw Nathaniel Hackett under the bus on the record, but nothing that he said was wrong in the fullness of time. And so I take some encouragement in that as well. Nice to see.
Yeah, and you make such a great point about the Broncos getting the coach set finally, and knowing that Sean Payton's legit, he's authentic, and he's going to be here rightfully for quite a while. I mean, going into last season, the Broncos had the same 2 questions they had going into this season. Did they get the head coach right? Did they get the quarterback right? And the answer was no for both last year. For this year, we can unequivocally say they got the head coach right. Sean Payton was the right hire, and he's already transformed the Broncos into more of a winning culture. But what I'm going to say is going to come off contradictory and hypocritical. I always, preach the Pat Bowlen standard and not settling for moral victories and wanting more for the Broncos. But it's nice, Chad, covering this team finally and them competing in December, them being relevant in December after Thanksgiving or after Halloween, as the case may be. And that wasn't the case like you talked about at 1-5. I mean, that looked like a tank job. It looked like they were in for a 2-win season and a high draft pick. They're giving us something to root for right now, something to watch for. And after 7 years of not having that, I think the least we can do is enjoy it.
It's true, man. You take away the 9-7 Gary Kubiak swan song in 2016, the closest we've been to a competitively relevant Broncos in December were the 2018 Broncos with Case Keenum, who came out of their bye, thanks to Philip Lindsay freaking blowing up, and went on a little bit of a run. Remember, this was Vance Joseph's saved the job season, that John Elway basically had to be strong-armed and to bring him back. But they went on a little run coming out of the bye, thanks to Philip. And then just when it looked like they were going to maneuver back into things, they regressed. You get to December, they were out of it again. So that's the closest. And that was 5 years ago. Think about that, dude. 5 years ago. All right, let's get to the raffle since we're all set up on the back end. First things first, though, we got to go through the breakdown of how the standings in November finished. We're going to do the raffle, and then we're going to go to the head-to-head. First things first, the number one finisher on Super Chat in the month of November with the gold. Bringing home the gold is Ethan, a.k.a. the DWI guys. Thank you, Ethan. The Duchess right there also bringing home the gold. Michaela Parker. Then it's Zeus McPeak at 3, FA at 4. And then 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, we got Naj, Troy, Mike Edel, the GLP, Surehang, and Coach Chris. That rounds out the top 10 just outside on the bubble. You can see there are 3 awesome, awesome people. But hey, there's always a chance in the month of December. So you know how it goes with the raffle we do live. Number 1 has more tickets in the hat, so to speak, than the number 10 finisher. So does number 2, 3. It just kind of steadily regresses down to number 10 has 1 ticket in the hat. So we're going to start from the last runner up and do it in reverse order till it reveals the winner. Mr. Producer, let's go. Let's see what we got here. The first runner up is Coach Chris, out. Thank you, Coach Chris. We love you. The GLP at 9, out. Troy is out. Love you, Troy. Love you, Gary. Surehang is out. FA, my friend, love you, out. Mike Edel, out. Zeus is out at as the 4th runner-up. The Duchess out as the 3rd. So I guess this would be the 2nd runner-up. Here's the 1st runner-up is Ethan. What? So the winner of the jersey in the month of November is none other than Naj Al-Taf. Is Naj in the room? I haven't seen him tonight. Have you seen him? I'll reach out to him if we don't see him. But Naj, the shot of life, wouldn't surprise me. Well, I don't want to get ahead of myself. But Naj, we love you. You know this. This is a guy that very soon he'll probably be the very first superstar segment we do when the season is over. And anyway, much love and respect. We will be. It's a little bit harder to get the information on Facebook, so we will be doing that this weekend. We'll have a winner for our Facebook giveaway for November. But that's Naj. Naj is the winner. And then we'll grab Sam here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure Naj's ears are ringing somewhere, and he's going to pop in sooner than later. But if you're listening after the fact, Naj, appreciate you so much. Congratulations. Very well deserved. And I think after seeing him at multiple meet and greets now, I'm ready to call Naj and crown him as the MHH meet and greet ambassador, because he is literally like the go-between for everyone that pops through the meet and greet. Everyone wants to talk to Naj, and you feel better about the Broncos, about yourself, about everything after one conversation. So congrats again, bro.
True. He's a guy whose number you want to have if you kind of get up on the wrong side of the bed. Maybe you're not feeling so good about yourself. Maybe you made that New Year's resolution and you're having a hard time, hanging on to it. Pick up the phone, call Naj. He'll be like ready to run through a brick freaking wall. Trust. So, and one last thing before I grab Sam here. To everybody who contributed, whether you finished in the top 10, if you contributed to MHH on YouTube last month, whether it's 99 cents or as some others, quite a lot more than that. Thank you so much. We don't take it for granted. We love you. We're always trying to think of ways to give back, and just understand we appreciate you. And everybody in the top 10 legendary mythical figures, we will be doing at the end of this month, just like we did last year. We'll be unveiling the Mount Rushmore for 2023. Can't wait to see how that shakes out. So, Sam, bro, thank you. Number 2 tonight, you demand. He says, I need to legitimately get in this raffle running once and for all. November was a hectic month for me. Maybe December's my month. Indeed, might could be, as my friend BA would say. Might could be. And here's the Duchess giving congrats and some props to Naj. I'm sure he'll appreciate that. Michaela, thank you so much for everything. So there you have it. There you have it. Should we, Zach? We're at 33 minutes. Sam Bam also jumping in again to Todd Ostendorf. What's he? I'm not sure which one.
Todd does not like that, Chad.
Oh,
he does not like the Let's Ride. So I think Sam's just having a little fun trolling him.
I see.
I like the buck him better. So do I.
We do too. We're Let's Ride became a terrible meme, obviously, last year. Morphed into Let's Hide and all that stuff. But Sam, thank you.
Or Todd has a couple if you're RG3. Remember that?
Oh yeah.
Super funny.
There was a couple points Todd made earlier that if we get some time on the other end of the head-to-head, I want to grab them if we have some time. Gary, the GLP, love you, big dog. We got to check on your other jersey, the jersey that Gary won for October. Has been out of stock, so we got to check on that. That's a good reminder. And Thank you, Gary. And Sam Bam saying, okay, fine, buck them. Indeed. That's with a B, you two. All right. Let me pull up, Zach, the head-to-head sheet so we can go ahead and see how the Broncos measure up to the Chargers. And this is really sweet because hitting Phil throwing down some props for Nash. Hitting week 14, Zach, these numbers obviously mean something, even though the Broncos still have that ridiculous outlier of the week 3, lay down, so to speak, to the Dolphins. But let's take a look here. So if you're new, green means top 10, red signifies bottom 10. If it's a black number, then that means it's right in the middle of the pack. So the Chargers and the Broncos separated by basically one game here. Broncos in the turnover margin are +5. They're tied for 6th. That's the 6th best turnover margin. That means they've taken it away 5 times more than they've given it. Meanwhile, the Chargers are ranked 10th, tied for 10th, I should say, with a +4 turnover margin. Neither team has done well to stay on the field. Broncos ranked 24th in time of possession, and the Chargers are 27th. When we examine these offenses, let's start with the Chargers, the opponent first here, Zach, and then we'll talk about the Broncos. They are middle of the pack, really, as an offense. They're 15th in yards per game. They're tied for 11th in points per game, averaging 23 points. They're not so good at running the ball. They're 25th, so they're a bottom 10 offense in rushing, averaging 97.7 rush yards per game. But they are a top 10 passing offense, barely. Thrown for 241 yards per game, 6 interceptions. They've lost 6 fumbles, 12 total giveaways. They're up there with 5 teams tied for the 6th fewest. And they've only allowed, Zach, 25 sacks. Look at that in comparison to the Broncos over here, which we'll get to, which puts them tied for 8th fewest. Third down, they're just outside the top 10. And in the red zone, Zach, this is a top 5 offense. They convert their possessions inside the 20 into touchdowns 64% of the time. So before we get into the Broncos, your observations of this Charger offense.
As an outsider, I think they made the right decision. They moved on from Joe Lombardi. He was their OC, who's now the Broncos OC under Sean Payton. They hired Kellen Moore, and it seemed to do a little, have a little bit more of a positive result on Justin Herbert. And he's still doing elite quarterbacking for the most part. I'm not the biggest Herbert fan, but when you realize the running game is mostly non-existent in Los Angeles because Austin Eckler is playing hurt, I'm convinced of that. He's been ineffective. He has no real tight end threat to speak of, and he lost his number 2 receiver in Josh Palmer, who I believe is coming back soon, if not this week. The rookie they drafted, Quentin Johnston, has been a bust to this point. All he has is Keenan Allen, and you still see a lot of green in there. So I give a lot of credit to that Chargers offense. They can still be deadly, though the book remains the same on Herbert. If you pressure him and rattle him, he will make a mistake. He's not the clutchest quarterback in the world, Chad.
Let's look at the Broncos here. 23rd in yards per game, averaging just under 300. They are tied for 15th in points per game, literally separated by exactly 1 point per game from the Chargers. 22 points per game. Net rushing, the Broncos are just outside the top 10, 13th, averaging 115.8 per game. Passing, though, there are only 5 teams worse in terms of passing yards per game than the Broncos. But they've only been picked off 7 times. That was only 4 times before the Houston game, which ties them for the 6th fewest. But they have lost 10 fumbles, many of those, not to pile on Russ, but many of those being Russ strips. Then you get to the total giveaways. The Broncos have 17, which puts them in the middle of the pack. Third down, though, this is where things get brutal because these were numbers here for the Broncos offensively, Zach. Third down and red zone that for a stretch over that 5-game period were 5-win winning streak. We're really starting to climb. It was good to see, but they kind of hit the skids. This is the 23rd, so that's officially a bottom 10 third down offense, converting, I should say, 35.8% of their third downs. Remember, this is significantly impacted by another outlier, which is going 0 for 11 on third down last week. Red zone, 48.9% conversion, 24th, Zach. Also a bottom 10. Your thoughts?
Can I point out one thing? I want to echo something Scott said. If you think Russ is bad, if you're complaining about the Broncos quarterbacking, at least your quarterback isn't Mitch Trubisky for anyone watching tonight's game, or Bailey Zappi for that matter. But what sticks out to me, Chad, a little too much red there for my liking still on the Broncos side, but third down percentage, that has been the glaring takeaway out of that Houston game. 0 for 11 on third down, I'm pretty sure they finished. Got to be better. I mean, you have a $245 million quarterback. You have arguable a Pro Bowl receiver in Cortland Sutton. You have other weapons on offense. There is no reason why, also an elite play caller in Sean Payton, no reason why you should ever have a goose egg on third down. So those two bottom stats there, Chad, actually the three bottom stats, if they can put those in the black even, not even green, they'll be much better for it.
All right, we get to the defense here. And again, these top 5 numbers for the Broncos are severely inflated due to that Dolphins game, but the Dolphins game factors in here. So let's start with the Chargers once again. Despite being coached by their head coach being a defensive czar, Brandon Staley, this is the 29th ranked yards per game defense. They're giving up 21.5 points per game, which ranks them 20th. A putrid yards per play, right there in the same ballpark as the Broncos, and that they don't have a 725 yard gash on their resume this season. Rushing, they're okay against the run, ranked 17th, averaging 113 yards per game on the ground. But look at this, as a passing defense, Zach, we get back to kind of some of these same talking points that we're supposed to have applied last week for Russ and the Broncos. This is the 31st ranked passing defense, putrid passing defense. They only have 6 interceptions. They have 10 fumble recoveries, though, so they've gotten quite lucky on falling on those loose balls. So that helps quite a lot. Then sacks, Zach, they have 41, so that's tied for third most. So they can get after the quarterback, which makes it kind of curious that they only have 6 picks. But third down, they're also very good at stopping you. So that's something that Sean Payton's going to have to figure out how to balance that line of going, all right, here's a defense that seems susceptible against the pass, but then all of a sudden they're like killers on third down. Got to find the way to kind of split that plum. Red zone, they're right in the middle of the pack, Zach, and then we'll look at the Broncos.
Yeah, they only have 6 picks, I can tell you, because of Brandon Staley, who's a fraud. I mean, that secondary is chock full of talent with Derwin James and Asante Samuel Jr., and to only have 6 interceptions, the Broncos have 4 more. The Broncos, of all teams, that should say something. I'm impressed, though, 41 sacks, and that's without Joey Bosa, who I'm pretty sure has missed a chunk of the season. Khalil Mack is really having a good year in Los Angeles. And when you scroll up and look at the Broncos sacks allowed versus what the Chargers do on defense, especially against Mike McGlinchey, Khalil Mack versus Mike McGlinchey, Chad, I am biting my fingernails over.
For sure. It's going to be dicey. They got to have an answer for it. Look at the Broncos defense, though. They're still basically bottom 10 ranking, including dead last against the run. That's something that, frankly, has persisted, Zach, as a trend beyond the Dolphins game. Is they just can't stop the run consistently, and it really has led to these discrepancies up here when we talk about time of possession. Bend don't break, all that. But then you get down to interceptions. The Broncos have 10, which ties them for 14th. 12 total fumble recoveries to, remember, the Chargers. Think of that run the Broncos went on with takeaways. Chargers only have 2 fewer fumble recoveries. But the Broncos, 22 total takeaways, still ranks first. Sacks, Broncos have 28, which puts them barely in the middle of the pack. They're dangerously close to falling into bottom 10 territory. They got to get that rolling. But this is still a very good defense on third down, the Broncos. So the Chargers are the 3rd best third down defense. The Broncos are the 4th, tied with a couple teams. And then in the red zone, this is a typo, but they're ranked 14th. All right, so it's like 51%, I want to say, if memory serves. So they're right barely above, Zach, the Chargers in terms of keeping opponents out of the end zone when they get inside the 20.
I was going to say 512% is pretty impressive, Chad. But if you scroll up to what the Broncos, I forgot already what the Broncos are on third downs and sacks allowed. They're 23rd on third down, 27th in sack. That is going to determine this game for me. That statistic on offense versus what the Chargers do on defense, 23rd and 27 versus third and third. That is where the game for Denver will be won or lost. And Schlereth talks about the offensive line being the victims here. Well, we'll see on Sunday. This is a good litmus test, whether it's Russ or whether it's the O-line.
Indeed. And I'm touching wood as I'm saying this. I'll even knock on it while I say this. Khalil Mack has a little bit of a penchant for saving his best performances for the Broncos. So let's hope that is not a trend that continues this week. Special teams still don't have a very good punter. But everything else about special teams, Zach, I mean, you're living large. Broncos are first in punt return average, first in kick return average. As a coverage unit, they're sixth in punt return against, covering punts, and they're seventh in covering kicks. And then field goal percentage is 92.6%, which is seventh. You look at the Chargers, they have a field goal percentage of 95%, ranks them sixth. Kickoff, they're good at covering kicks. They're good at covering punts. So they still have a very good upper echelon special teams coordinator, but not as great success in terms of their kickoff returns. But they do have production in the punt return game, Zach. The only team better than the Chargers returning punts is the Broncos. So, and then last thing here, the Chargers are fifth worst in committing penalties. And their opponents, though, also offset that with quite a few penalties committed. Look at the Broncos, though. Their opponents have committed the most penalties thus far. So Broncos have risen. Remember, penalties committed, they were like worst in the league for that first quarter and a half of the season, but they've bounced back, Zach.
Doesn't seem that way on Sunday or Thursday or Monday, does it, Chad? It seems like for every 10 Broncos penalties, one is called on the opponent, but obviously it's not the case. It just feels that way. And this is my annual. We go over the special teams. This is my annual compliment to Ben Kotwika, Mike Westhoff, Marvin Mims, Will Lutz, and my annual diss, I guess, against Riley Dixon, who is the only component of that special teams unit that's holding it down. I mean, first, 6th, 1st, 7th, 7th, then you drop down to 26th and 24th. That's the only literally red area on that side of the ball. Overall, though, it's been a revelation this year. I couldn't be more impressed with what Kotwika and Westhoff have been doing.
I just want to take a quick look at some of the, statistical leaders for both teams. Singleton still having himself a year as a tackler. Murray is the leader for the Chargers. And then their safety, Derwin James, second with 82. Sacks, though, look at this. Khalil Mack, freaking machine, 15 sacks. He's more than doubled the Broncos team leader, Benito. Benito, though, he started kind of seeing some results again after jumping out to a hot start, 5.5 sacks. Then he went like a month without a sack, and he's started to kind of bounce back. Interceptions, Simmons still leads the way for the Broncos with 3. But look at that. Your boy, Zach, Jaquan, tied with Kareem with 2 picks. Let's see, points scored. Receiving yards, Keenan Allen already over 1,000. So that's one thing that, like, Justin Herbert and that offense, Kellen Moore, they don't have any problems finding ways and ensuring that their best players impact the game. The Broncos still have a hard time, even though Sutton's getting that touchdown production. Zach, one thing that kind of bothers me, it's a lingering concern about this offense, is why aren't the best players finding ways to shine and contribute like consistently every single game? Sutton has been on a tear relative to touchdowns, but look at that yardage production discrepancy, I should say. Insane. I mean, he's basically doubled Keenan Allen, Cortland Sutton's yardage production. And Judy comes in second with 491 receiving yards. Rushing, though, Eckler's got 446. Broncos are led by Javante's 584. Russ, 2,300. We'll call it 2,400 passing yards. Herbert's already over 3,000. So there you have it. There's your head-to-head. Broncos, Chargers, as Scott says, though, relative to the punting issue. When you are punting in Denver in that thin air and altitude, half your games, no excuse to be that putrid and gross punting.
Yeah, I mean, going over some of the things we just talked about on the screen, I didn't realize Khalil Mack was having that good of a season. And when Nick Bonito, when it comes to him, have you ever seen 7 more unremarkable sacks than, I mean, how many can you really recall top of your mind where Bonito beat his man one-on-one? Not disparaging him. I'm just saying it's crazy he's already at 7. And it speaks to the level of the defense where that pass rush needs to get home. They need to have more consistent sack production, and that's been a theme from week 1. You mentioned something worrying about Courtland Sutton, but it's also worrying on offense. Russell Wilson is the second leading rusher. Your 35-year-old quarterback, and not the free agent you brought in Samaje Perine, not the electric undrafted rookie in Jaleel McLaughlin. You pride yourself as a ground and pound team with a 3-headed monster, yet your aging quarterback is your second leading guy there. So a little bit ski-wampus, to quote you, Chad.
I've almost forgot about this. The reason Khalil Mack sits at 15 sacks is he had a 6-sack performance, Zach, against the Raiders. A 6-sack. What's the record, Scott? Derek Thomas, 7? I'm pretty sure. So that's insane, dude.
Still has more than Jonathan Cooper, though, in one game.
One game.
And 9 others on top of that. I mean, Khalil has, he kind of leveled off after that early start in Oakland, now Las Vegas, but he's really coming to play this season. It's going to be a tough matchup for McGlinchey and company.
Yeah, Todd, I think it's time to, even if you're not going to draft a punter, you got to really, they did try to, move that needle forward with some new old blood, so to speak, bringing in a former Bronco in Riley Dixon, and it just hasn't panned out. And yeah, Mike, Broncos need one of those big breakout games from Jerry Jeudy really quickly, but in order for that to happen, Russ has to look his way. And that's been another one of the big topics of conversation this week. Local press really keeping that a hot topic for Sean Payton when they talk to Russ, Jerry Jeudy. Why is Jerry Jeudy being basically not seen, running wide open, etc.? The Ronk, thank you, brother. Really appreciate you as always, my friend. But Zach, I think we've hit all the buckets we wanted to tonight. Unless you got anything else that you wanted to get to, we got a few messages. We dip out.
Yeah, just on the Jeudy thing. Usually when a receiver complains or has some sort of outward outburst, for lack of a better word, they try to give the squeaky wheel the grease. My only concern, Chad, is they're going to try to force feed Jerry Jeudy to placate him, and that's going to be a detriment to the game flow of the offense. But we'll see what happens on Sunday. Nevertheless, though, that was another tremendous installment of the Mile High Huddle podcast. If you're not doing so, please follow us on X/Twitter at the MHH Pod. You can follow the main account at Mile High Huddle. Chad at Chad and Jensen, myself at Kelberman NFL, and Scott, our producer, at Scout Kennedy. If you guys want some merch like we're always rocking each and every single podcast, get yours now at mhhmerch.com. If you haven't dropped us a like, please do so at facebook.com/Mile High Huddle Pod. Also, you can find us on Instagram at mile_high_huddle. If you're on Apple Podcasts, if you listen to this podcast on Apple Podcasts, make sure you're leaving your Football Priest a 5-star review for a chance to win some merch each and every single month. But if anything, y'all, please subscribe, like, and share this video and every video you see on the MHH channel. It really helps us grow and reach more Broncos fans just like you, baby.
Amen to that. A mile high salute and a special shout out to these great Super Chat superstars and supporters. Tonight, we will be following this up, as you know, per our tradition, with a tweet tagging everybody mentioned here. But special props to the Duchess, special props to Zeus, the Papa Bear, David McElrath, Sam Bam going off, Troy, Gary, the GLP, the swashbuckler himself on Facebook. We've got Phil, we've got Claude, we've got the Ronk, we've got Lawrence Rivera. Much love and respect. And when you guys see Naj, remind him that he is the champion this month. I'll find him and let him know. But again, love you guys. Can't wait to see how this game shakes out. Zach, my parting thoughts on Broncos Chargers is, amid that 5-game romp, you kind of started to forget what it felt like. to be a Broncos team that kind of couldn't get out of its own way and would throw in the towel at the first sign of adversity, and kind of, when we talk about reading your own headlines, so to speak, they were doing it then, reading into how bad they were and all this. And, we quickly forgot about that. I hope, and I don't think it will happen, but my hope is they're not going to, the players, devolve back into that loser posture because of one single setback. They should be focusing on the fact that despite the imperfections of that game, they still should have won that game. So it'll be curious, a point of interest, a key, if you will, Zach, to see how the Broncos take the field and perform, intensity level, confidence level, belief level, all that. Because if those things are in order on the intangible side, typically, what follows? The execution. So let's hope that is the case, and that Sean Payton and Vance Joseph have their troops ready to go.
Yeah, I'm with you there, partner. I mean, the Broncos have been so traditionally and historically bad over the last half decade against the AFC West. We know about the streak that ended the season against Kansas City. We know about the streak that's ongoing with the Raiders. But if there's one team where the Broncos had success, it was against Los Angeles. They've tended to split with them each and every season. And just leave it up to the Chargers and Brandon Staley. The Chargers are going to charger. It's only a matter of time. I'm feeling pretty confident, Chad, despite the loss last week going into Sunday's game.
Indeed, Phil. Good words of advice. Watch this game tonight. Count your blessings. We have Russ. And thank you, Todd, for reminding everybody to hit the like button on your way out. It helps us tremendously. Special shout out to Pearl. Much love. Hope you're doing well. And Kathy, she's saying, hey, is it time to sign the punk god, Matt Ariza?
I would.
What's that?
I would. I was actually thinking that when we were talking about the punter. Absolutely. His name has been cleared. I don't think you take on too much negative PR because it came out in his favor of that whole, incident, that case. And he was, if there's such thing as a generational punter, Chad, he looked like he fit that bill. I think he'd be tremendous in Denver's altitude.
Love you guys. We'll see you for the gut reaction on Sunday. Have yourselves a great weekend.
We'll see you Sunday. Take care. And as always, go Broncos.